Hi, the Magpie! And this Monday, I wanted to do a bit of a tutorial for you on how to circuit bend with an LTC1799. Probably the most straightforward or common way to do a speed modification or a pitch modification or a clock source modification when it comes to a bit more advanced things than, for example, toys like this. So it's definitely something that I intend to do quite a lot moving forward here, so I figured I could make this type of video and then just refer back here in the future, so I don't have to explain it in each individual case where I do it. But yeah, circuit bending a toy like this, like the bread and butter of circuit bending is essentially doing a pitch modification, I would argue. But doing it in a toy, you basically just poke around with your finger until you find it starting to go usually down in pitch or up in pitch, and then like essentially all you do is a voltage divider per usual, and you put that on a pot. You may or may not know that that is what you're doing, but it's more like, I would argue that it's 100% of the cases that is basically what you're doing. So what you can just do is you go potentiometer with 3 legs and you go center pin to wherever you found shenanigans going on, and then you go 1 pin to plus on the batteries and 1 to ground on the batteries, and just see what happens. It will drain your batteries. That's what's gonna happen. But in any case, when you want to step it up to circuit bending something like this, which I intend to do in this case because I needed something to sort of show it on, Casio SK1, a keyboard like this, that in most cases, at least with older things like this, has a clock source that is outboarded, if that is the way you phrase that. So there's a physical actual clock source on the inside of this one that we are simply going to replace with an LTC1799. This is a very practical, very small and pretty expensive component that is just a variable precision oscillator. So with the help of just a potentiometer, just like we put in toys, this little component in here that I'm gonna take out in just a second can go from 1 kilohertz to 33 megahertz. And most of these keyboards and gear that we, at least I, have a tendency to want to circuit bend or modify work in the like 10 to 20 megahertz range. So this is perfect. But yeah, it is very small and it's pretty expensive, like $5 or something, $6 maybe. And of course it's SMD, so it might be a bit intimidating. For that reason, I do want to give a shout out to circuitbenders.uk, which I don't know if anyone else is selling like pre-prepared little PCBs where they have, I don't know if they hand solder it or if they just order pre-prepared PCBs and then they charge more for selling it to you, but you can buy them there at least. I have gone and made my own little through-hole version, and it's something that I'm gonna update and just provide for free. All the components except the LTC1799 on that one is through-hole, so it's very easy to solder. And in my case, I also actually put a voltage regulator right on it. So you can see it says 78L05. So if you put that component in there, you can power it straight from the battery or the power source of the thing that you decide to circuit bend. Otherwise you will have to just, find a point on the PCB that provides you with a voltage that is in the range of the LTC1799, which is usually not a problem at all because most of the chips on the inside of those keyboards and stuff run on a voltage range that is same for the LTC1799. So not necessarily a problem, but it can go up to 5 volts, so if there's a lot of juice and very much more so easily to access the battery or the power source, you can just work with a voltage regulator instead. So I just made it convenient for myself and you if you decide to download this Gerber file and order these. But yeah, I intend to, and I have actually already started making a lot more experimental PCBs in regards to circuit bending, so all of that is coming later. For now, we're just gonna do this. And as I pointed out, all the other components are through holes, so they're very easy to solder. But soldering a component that is this small is not that easy, at least not for me. So let me show you how I go about doing that, and maybe that can help you a bit. So here's another PCB. I'm gonna do it on this because I really need to start doing it on these PCBs, so I might as well. And we can see up here is where I am gonna solder the LTC1799. And what I've done is I have modified the footprint for that specific component to have longer solder pads in the up and down direction, making it a bit easier to not fuck it up completely. Because if you look here on this one, this is like a earlier version before I started doing that, you can see that those pads are way shorter. So longer ones, I just like that. I prefer that, so I'm gonna provide that. Oh yeah, since it's so small, let's see how close we can get. This is not gonna make my life easier, I tell you that much. Wow, very nice. Yeah, for you. How I start is I go with some floss, which is this icky goo that is not nice in a sandwich, but really convenient for this, because it's gonna make soldering it sort of look up a bit more. You can Google all about floss. It's an art form in itself to work with, but I'm just gonna show you how I do it. So I just, I put a little bit on, not too much, just a little bit, because even though there is floss in your solder, this is gonna help me keep the LTC1799 in place when I do the first solder. Oh, like that. Okay. Then we're gonna line it up like that. And I think I took a bit too much floss, but it looks pretty good. Then I'm just gonna load up my tip with some solder here, and I use a pretty wide tip because I'm too lazy to change tips. But yeah, just find what's nice for you. But then I'm gonna, this is gonna be hard. Just do like that. Yeah. Then we have one. And you can see and hear the floss sizzle about, which is nice, because we're just gonna wipe off all of the excess later. But yeah, starting with that corner is convenient in my opinion, because that side is way easier. Now this side with 3 little solders here is gonna be a bit more tricky. But since this one is now very much in place, it's not gonna be, it's not gonna fly away, at least. So that's kind of nice. So then let's just find a nice angle, go in, and wipe it like that. I think I got 2 out of 3. It's hard to see. So I just go in with some solder and I try to like wipe it with some solder there. Like, but yeah, 2 out of 3. So the middle one actually I did not get, seemingly, meaning that I had to go in again. And now I'm gonna mess this up probably, but that's good because it gives me a chance to show you what happens or how to like solve that. So that does not look very good, wouldn't you agree? What I then do is I go in with some of this, which is called something, I just can't remember, and I put some solder on the tip, just a tiny bit, and then I just press that against it here. Boom. To grab all the excess from that blob. And now it looks good. But that's a bit of a technique for you. I'm gonna do the last one also. So when that's done, we wanna wipe it so we get rid of all of that excess goo. For that, I just use teröd. It's delicious. I don't know what teröd is except alcohol, but it does the trick. So when we have wiped it, then it looks good. So it's a bit intimidating, it's rather finicky, but when you get used to doing it then it's very straightforward and easy, and you don't have to spend unnecessary amounts of money on having other people do it for you. Because if you know about ordering SMD PCBs, which if you don't, I can actually make a easy tutorial for that, because I mean there has to be millions of tutorials on how to order a PCB, but I could show you how I go about doing that to keep the price as low as possible, because then you could just do that. But for all intents and purposes, we are going to move on as if I put together LTC1799 PCB. And instead of going into too much detail in regards to how it works with dividing down the range you're setting on the potentiometer you're using with, I'm just gonna link to the datasheet and to circuitbenders.uk, and we will probably write something also. But all of that said, I will also start providing a list of, yeah, this is the value of resistance that you want to put on your LTC1799 chip if you decide to use that as a replacement for the original clock. And I'm gonna do that for all individual chips on the inside of all of the things that I circuit bend, because I might as well have a database for me, and then I just as well can provide that for you also. So if we now open the Casio SK1, we can see here that it's got one single IC on the inside on this side, and that's the Oki M6283. You can just Google that, and you will even find like a Casio SK1 schematic or circuit type datasheet where you can see the clock source for it also laid out. I can see if I provided that, then it's on the screen now, and you will be able to get a reading without having to find if they put it on the PCB or not, which I kind of doubt they did. But instead, if you can find that document, it will be labeled how fast the clock is. And then you can just set up your LTC1799 chip here with the resistors for like the highest possible value, and then of course a potentiometer, because the more resistance, the lower the clock frequency. So a value that gives you a range that you enjoy working with, because you don't want to go too fast and you don't want to go too slow. But I will write all of that down. So I will write down what I find for this one and how to set that up. Like, oh, 100K or 200K on a potentiometer is perfect for replacing this with an LTC1799 on specifically the Casio SK1 and every other keyboard that uses that chip. I mean, so this component here is the clock source. If you want to have more information about the different types of clock sources and how they look and stuff, I will provide pictures for that also. I will take photographs of what I found, but actually they provide that over on circuitbenders.uk, so that's very, very nice of them, and I will provide a link in the description, as I've said already, to them, where you can read about that as well, because they can look and act a bit differently, but the general approach is always the same regardless, because the chips have a clock out pin and a clock in pin, and we do not care about the clock out for this simple approach to doing stuff like that. There are other things that I will explore in the future and then provide information and stuff. It's like breaking new ground for circuit bending, so I can't really talk about it at the moment, but for this we only care about the clock in, because that's what's, yeah, clocking the chip. So what I have to do is desolder this one, and this is one of the absolutely worst ones to do that, simply because it's got a lot of pins here. How you do that, the easiest way, is you simply go in with your finger from the other direction and you pressure it in a direction with that finger that is going away from the joint you heat up first. So kind of an art form in itself, this, but that's in my opinion the easiest way. So if we like start heating shit up here, we can just start pressuring while we do that. you start to feel that it's coming out. And when you have done that for a little while, then you go and you start pressing in the other directions. I'm doing that with my thumb now in case the angle is awful. It becomes very hot, but that's just part of the pleasure of doing this. But yeah, old PCBs like this have a tendency to let you just break the solder joints also, so they come off, like the copper traces start coming off with what you're pulling out. But as you could probably hear there, we are now kind of halfway there, because it came off in one direction. Yeah, there we go. So you don't even have to break this one, meaning that if you ever so desire, you can just put this one back. That's gonna be tricky though, but you can. And now we just want to make sure that these are clean and not unnecessarily touching each other unless they're supposed to. And with supposed to, I mean that they are already on the same line on the PCB, which is really easy to see on these old PCBs. But if they don't, then they were going through the component and magic was happening. So then we don't want them to touch each other, because that means you're connecting two traces that you don't maybe necessarily want to connect. But moving on, I am gonna work with one of these from circuitbenders.uk because I already have it wired up and it allows me to show you some more of the steps. So what we want to do now is we want to grab a multimeter and we want to find, this is actually something that you should probably do before you get rid of that component that I did, but screw it, I didn't. So we want to find a voltage that is within the range of the LTC1799. Now we work with a multimeter. So we just put one of these on ground on the batteries, and then we turn this one on again, and then we just start poking around. Oh, 4.95 on this very lonely point there, so that's kind of perfect. We might as well just go with that one. So I'm just gonna attach power there for this little PCB here, and ground I can just wire to the batteries all the way over there, and blurry, but very straightforward. Just the ground side of the batteries, and then finding a power line. And then I have color coded this. I have a green wire that we're gonna find out where to connect here, and then two yellow ones for the potentiometer. And I don't know, I'm not gonna do any calculation, I'm just gonna go with a value. So maybe 100k to start with, that's always good. Actually, we're gonna go with 200k because naturally that's twice as good as 100k, and conveniently enough, that was what I found. Well, yeah, you just attach that. Like for me, on my little PCB, I have provided just 2 points for the pot here. So one to the center and one to one of the sides. And that's very much the same for the circuitbenders.uk one. And simply, if you find that, oh, this is going too low in speed, you just switch to a smaller value. And if you feel like, oh, I can probably go lower, you just switch to a higher value. So I always recommend going with multi-threaded wires, and you pre-solder. So you snip and then you add solder to those, and then you solder it to the thing you're supposed to solder to. Just makes life a lot easier. But yeah, power, ground, hooked up. We have a pot. We are ready to start testing, but we gotta prepare this one also. So that one I will just pre-solder now. Boom, boom. Now, this one we wanna attach to something here, but I am not sure what at all. But we can sort of try to start figuring it out. Like we have this wide thing going here from one of the pins, and then we have a couple of pins in the close vicinity that also like goes to stuff. But I like the thick one because That's nice. Like so. Sometimes you can check which specific pin out of all of these that you're supposed to attach clock into, but I don't know. I like to be wild and crazy. Because then what we have to do is we have to restart it until it like fires up properly, which it does not seem to do. Meaning that I most likely attached it to the wrong input. Because when you don't know what you're doing, like I'm doing now, I'm sort of trying to YOLO it here, then it's a lot of restarting, and you have to start it up in a good clock value, so to speak. Otherwise it's just not gonna start up properly and simply not work. But it's usually just a bunch of trial and error. So like setting the pot, starting it over, setting the pot again, starting it over, switching to another pin that you think is the correct one and starting it over a bunch, and yeah, so on and so forth until you have a magical eureka moment. Okay, I figured that I might as well just jump over here to show you stuff instead of like, yeah, having shitty speaker sound when I describe where we have ended up. So yeah, I was just trying back and forth for a pretty good while until I figured out what worked. So, however, in this case, I also decided to actually move the power for the LTC1799 from that original pin. So I will provide a picture, which I intend to do for everything that I circuit bend. There's gonna be a database of just, here's how I wired it. But yeah, I put it on the same power line as the ship on the inside. But what I noticed that was so bizarre, just randomly by accident, is that if I powered it from another one of the pins, it acts really weird. So we're gonna get there with this switch. I just feel like first we should probably just listen to it, because I bet everyone has heard an SK1 with these sampled sounds, but when you pitch those down, they just sound so good, in my opinion. Did I say that I bumped up the value? Because I did bump up the value. So we now have 500k here, meaning that we can go very low. Artifacts level low. Which I don't know what happens if we like have it self-play. Yeah, okay. But yeah, you can make all kinds of crazy sound effects when you start to pitch something like this down so much so the ship doesn't necessarily know what, or it knows exactly what to do, it just plays sounds, but yeah. However, like the human voice I noticed is really cool. Gas ensemble. Sounds sort of like a... So that's really dope. However, one thing that I did notice, and we're gonna get here in a second, is that sampling doesn't necessarily work. But I simply do not remember if this was a broken unit to begin with, because I have like all the other Casio samplers, so the SK1 doesn't intrigue me that much when playing around and making music. I usually go for something else. I do not remember, but it might have been the case. However, if we like try to sample, it's just stuck in synth mode. So that's why I stick more to these sounds. However, let's finally get to the switch. So what this switch does is it's simply switching between powering the LTC1799, I've said it too many times in this video. It's powering it from two different places. That's all. So you switch between those two places. And it's really weird. Because when you power it from that point that I found, it's as if we're like dialing in a radio station, kind of. I don't know what's going on or how to play it, but it's kind of cool. Seems to be very much based on both which sound you pick. What? Yeah, if you want to have vinyl crackles. Pitch. Like keyboard controlled vinyl crackles. How cool is that? And you can pick different emblems. Please sample this and make something. If you want me to make music with it, stick around, I guess.